Hour Sports Show. This is episode 747, joined by special guest Jennifer A. Garrett. She's a big into the sports world, sports industry. She has a show called Move the Ball, and she went to Alabama and Gonzaga. So we're going to get to all of that, but she's really inspiring. Like I said, she's really busy, and she does a lot of work. So how are you and your family doing today? I just want to say thank you for joining, by the way, first of all. But how are you and your family doing so far?
Well, thank you for having me, for one. I really appreciate being on the show. And my family's good. We're healthy, which is most important. And so yeah, it's all good. So thank you for asking.
Anytime. So I want to start off with your childhood and while growing up. Obviously, when did you start realizing that you wanted to be in the sports industry and working with athletes, talking to them? And who was that one person that you had in the sports industry that you looked up to as a role model?
Sure, great question. So to answer the beginning of that is, when did you want to get into the sports industry? So I fell in love with football when I was 4, but I never thought that my path was going to be doing work in the sports industry. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a nurse. She wanted to be an engineer, but her dad wouldn't let her. And so I kind of grew up with, a more technical mind. And so I went to school to be an engineer. So that was my path. So I thought was, go in the corporate world, climb the corporate ladder, got an MBA, went to law school. So I thought I would just be a corporate person. And I published my book, Move the Ball, back in 2013. And back then I thought, okay, let me share what I know about football and how it translates to life and success. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey. But I always thought that, well, maybe I'll catch some lucky break and something will happen. But until then, I'll still be, doing my thing in the corporate world. So I really didn't think that it would be possible, quite honestly. And I think the biggest thing, if I could go back and tell my younger self something, would be, don't limit where you think your path can go. Like, I always thought that I could do whatever I wanted on the path that I was in. So in engineering, I was like, yeah, I can do whatever, but I never thought about sports until later because I didn't think it was possible. And there's just so many ways to connect with people now, to create opportunities. And so you really can do anything that you want if you just have the courage to put yourself out there and, to go after that.
Mm-hmm. And who was that one person that you looked up to in the sports industry while growing up?
Yes, that's the other part of the question. So I'm from Chicago, Chicago Bears fan. Football is my big sport, although I do like other sports too. And so, for me, Walter Payton was big because a lot of people choose Walter Payton because it's not just about what he did on the field, but it's his heart, it's who he was as a person, his character, and the contributions he made beyond the game. And so I, like many other people, looked up to him as a kid.
You're gonna like this. Actually, we had Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs on the show.
Oh, awesome! Very cool.
It was an honor talking to them, and obviously they're Bears legends. And
yes.
So I want to ask you though, what did you learn in high school while you're working on your craft to be in the sports industry? What was the main thing that you learned in high school before going to college?
The main thing I learned in high school, I would say, is probably the hard work is important. You got to put the work in, right? But it's also about aligning yourself with the right people. And so making sure the people you surround yourself with are not just positive people, but people that can help you learn and to grow. I have a podcast, as you mentioned, and a lot of the athletes I have on the show, they talk about when they went into the league, it was about who they could align themselves with to help them figure out, how do I survive? Right, playing professional football or baseball or whatever. And so same thing in our careers. It was like, what mentors could I have? What people could I get in my circle that could really help me to propel my career forward?
So obviously you went to Gonzaga and Alabama. So what was that like going to two big schools in college, not only football and all the sports, they're competitive. So what was the experience like going to both colleges like that?
Yeah, I mean, they're both great schools academically, but they have great athletic programs. I mean, Alabama is known for a number of sports, but football is kind of a big one for them too, right? And so, I mean, to be a part of that community is an experience like none other. I'm sure everyone that goes to a Power 5 school has that same story, but it really is. It's the energy that you get around these programs, and people coming together. Obviously, sports teaches you to come together as a team to reach a common objective, but outside of the players, I mean, the fans, and as a fan, you're coming together with other people for this common thing, and you're bonding and aligning to cheer on your team, right? So it's just an incredible experience.
Yeah. So, would you say that obviously it's a great way to start your career? So, did you get to cover any games or interview any players while you were at Alabama and Gonzaga?
No, back then I wasn't doing any sports stuff at all. So I really was focused on, I have this engineering path that I'm going. So I did not get to do that.
So take me back to your first opportunity when you got to cover games, and take me back to your first interview you've done, and then the first couple of games that you covered too, back to start off your career.
Yeah, so it's a great question. Thinking back, like the first interview I've done, I mean, I really didn't cover games because I wasn't a sports journalist or anything like that. So for me, I mean, really the podcast was the big thing for me, where I actually, covered an interview. So season 1 of the podcast, I haven't done as many episodes as you guys have. I've done 100, so I'm a little bit farther behind. But my very first interview was with Chris Leak, who Chris was the Florida quarterback that led the team to win a BCS championship in 2006. So, and he was named 2006 BCS MVP. And so, I mean, that was an incredible interview because as you know, being a podcast host, I mean, the conversations you have with your guests, I mean, there's so many great insights and experiences and stories that you learn. And so for me, I grow as much as my listeners do from hearing the stories. So I would say it was really interesting to hear his perspectives. I mean, keep in mind, he was, I don't know how much you know about Chris, but he was, led his high school team to 3 state championships, lots of records in North Carolina as a high school student, number 1 rated football player in the country. Oh, wow. And then, went to Florida. And so just to hear the mindset and the philosophies of someone that had played at that level and that had done really great things as an athlete leading his team, for me, I very much enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah. So speaking of your podcast, when did this come about? And obviously your book, you released your book in 2013. And just tell me, how grateful are you to be in this position right now, to be able to have this podcast and connect with athletes, and not only talk about their on the field stuff, but talk about off the field and their personalities and the families and their stories. So what's it like to have that and your book now out there?
Yeah, so the podcast I kicked off the day after the Super Bowl last year. And the reason I thought about podcasting was it's another way to bring value to your audience, to have conversations, to learn, to grow, to inspire. And so for me, I'll say that it's been an incredible journey to be a podcaster. I had thought about it for a while before I actually did it. And I was like, you know what, let's do this. So the day after the Super Bowl, thematically, it made sense for the podcast. I mean, I never thought that I would be on this path. Like when I wrote the book, I thought, first off, I thought the book's going to make a lot of money, right? I'm going to be rich, right? That's like every author. They think it's going to sell 1 million copies and it's going to be great. And that's not quite how it works. That could happen. But for me, it was I put this product out there, and it was an opportunity to really connect with people about why football, why the competitive athlete mentality translates to success beyond sports. And so having these athletes come on the show and the work that I get to do with them, they are athletes, but they are more than athletes. They are people just like us. They have lessons, they have stories, they have families. And so being able to learn about the other sides of who they are is important too, because that's what we're going to connect with, especially if you were never an athlete, right? But you can connect with the other experiences and stories and hardships and things that they go through.
So for you, what does the title "Move the Ball" mean to you? And obviously, whoever doesn't know about your podcast, what else? What else do you guys talk about other than that? And what does the title mean to you?
Sure. Yeah, the title, when I created the title because it was the title of the book first and the podcast, was about moving something forward, whether you know football or not. I mean, the book was all about football, but it was in football games, you try to drive that forward progress, right? Get closer to your goal line. And so for me, in our lives, it was, well, how do you move the ball? You don't need to know anything about football, but you can conceptually grasp, moving a ball forward, right? And so really what I was trying to do was getting people to think about, did I move my ball, whatever, pick a ball, right, forward each day by taking ownership, by being that quarterback in my life and really figuring out what my playbook needed to be so that I could make that forward progress and get across that goal line and whatever that goal was for you. And so that's kind of what Move the Ball means to me. And, I really tried to elevate it so it's not just about football. It's about that competitive athlete mentality and those lessons. So on the podcast, we do talk about that quite a bit, but I also have Fortune 500 C-suite leaders on, as well as successful entrepreneurs. So I've had a CEO of Halo Top, the ice cream, on, CEO of Polaris on, trying to think who else. Well, there's a couple, but like other people that are not just athletes to talk about how does leadership connect to success, and what are the lessons that people can take away that they can put into practice so that they can be successful in whatever success looks like for them.
Yeah, so I listened to a couple of your episodes, and obviously you do a different series. Right now you're doing Pat to the Draft, since the draft is coming up soon. So what has that experience been like, talking to all these college prospects and getting to know them and seeing and to see how ready they are to get drafted and waiting for their name to be called?
Yeah, it's been amazing. So last year I was at the NFL Combine and I got approached by a couple agents about doing the series. And I thought, okay, let's make it happen. Because my episodes are normally Mondays and Thursdays, twice a week. But because we were going to do this series, we do one every single day. And I've just been blown away by hearing the life stories of these young men and the lessons that they've taken away from football. Because I think back to when I was 22, 23, and I'm just like, I don't think that like some of these lessons that they know clicked in my head till I was older. So it's been really neat to see. And of course, because I've had these conversations, I'm even more looking forward to the draft to hear their name get called. And some of them get drafted, some of them get picked up as undrafted free agents. But it's neat to then see the journey. So guys that were on my show last year, it's been neat to follow them over the past year and see their rookie season and see how they've grown.
Yeah, so so I want to ask you, what was it like being at the NFL Combine in person, seeing all these players working on their talent and connected with all? Obviously, in this business, it's all about connecting and networking. And
yes,
for you, what was it like connecting with all these players in person during the Combine, and also the agents that you spoke with?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, being at the Combine is great because it's a good place to network. It's a good place to connect with these athletes and see them, up close and personal. Right. And one thing that I really learned, so I've been going to the Combine for about 5 years now. One of the things I noticed right away is the energy around the athlete. So for example, on the bench press, right, so the way the Combine works is, you've got different position groups that go each day and different times. And so, for example, let's take running backs. They're doing the bench press. When one guy is up to do the bench press, all the other running backs, they are cheering him on, even though you are still competing, right? But they still want each and every person to perform at their best. And that's how it should be in sports and in life, right? But we see in life sometimes people, they get jealous or they don't want to encourage other people. So for me, that was something that I really noticed, which was super cool, because these guys didn't all play together, right? They're all here for this thing, which is going to help define their future, but they're still very supportive and willing to cheer everyone else on and make sure that each one is doing what they can to perform well.
So obviously all of us went through a tough time last year with the pandemic, and we're still going through a tough time. And for you, what have you learned yourself as a like a podcaster, an interviewer, and when the sport shut down, and what have you learned though for yourself in utilizing different platforms, and what have you been doing from the past year, and what have you learned?
Yeah, so I mean, I think last year taught us all the importance of evolving and adapting and adjusting to the situation, right? So that's what I did, just like everybody else. I think it forced us to be more in a virtual world, right? And so getting more comfortable with different tools like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meets, and all those platforms. So some of those, like Zoom, I had used before, Teams, not so much. So it really forced me to learn new platforms so that I can stay connected with people. It also gave me other questions that I could ask my guests, because I wanted to know, how do they navigate through the last year? Because it's always good to see what are other people doing and what can you learn from their experiences. So it's given me some good questions to ask too.
So so you know who you remind me of when it comes to work ethic? Amy Trask, if you know her.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had her on the show too, and you remind me of her when it comes to your work ethic, and you work hard, and obviously she has a book also, and it's just amazing what you're doing, and you're really inspiring, and with your show, with your podcast, I love what you're doing. It's really amazing.
Well,
So
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
yeah, so I gotta ask you, other than the podcast, what else you've been doing? Obviously you're busy with other stuff, but what else you like mainly focus on outside the podcast?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I work with a lot of executives as well as pro athletes on their branding. For one, so it's not branding when it comes to football, but it's branding. What are you doing outside of the game to be successful? Because as you know, the professional football career is not very long, right, for most people. So there's a lot of guys that need to think about what's next. And so helping them to work on their branding. Some of them want to go speak. Some of them want to be entrepreneurs. Some of them want to just go work in a company. So figuring out, how do I navigate that? And then on the executive side, it's helping executives to be better leaders, to drive higher performance within their organizations.
So I gotta ask you, where do you see yourself where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
It's a great question. So I envision still seeing this podcast. Hopefully it's, still going strong. I am planning on writing another book. I've had this plan for a while, so we'll see when it actually happens. But I've toyed around with different ideas. It's all going to have some sort of sports tie to it, but again, along the same genre of motivation, self-help, professional development. So I would like to say that in 5 years, this other book is written now. And for me, it's really about just continuing to let people know about my platform and the work that I do and trying to serve and inspire as many people as I can, whether you're an athlete or not.
So speaking of connecting with athletes, obviously I had Brian Chamberlain on the show yesterday.
Yes.
So so what's it like connecting with him? When was the first time you connected with him? And in general, though, other outside of him, like the athletes that you connected with, what's it like just to keep that connection with them?
Yeah, so Byron is amazing. I love him. We've been working together for the last 2 years on some different football projects. And so I did have Byron on my show last year. And one of the things that he said, which he very much lives by, is he talked about how when he was in Denver with Mike Shanahan, and Mike Shanahan used to say, whatever we're going to do, we're always going to do it first class. I don't care what it is. I don't know if you mentioned that on the show or not, but for me, like, he truly does think no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a first class effort. And that's how I roll. And so the other day, this was probably a couple of weeks ago, he put together something and he was telling me, he's like, whatever I do is always going to be first class. And it's true. So he's definitely one of those professionals that lives by what he speaks. And yeah, I really enjoy getting to work with Byron. And then just some of the other professional athletes. I mean, at the end of the day, they're human beings. I mean, yes, their careers might have been more in the spotlight than you or I, and some of their accomplishments might have been more fun than you or I from a sports standpoint. But at the end of the day, they're people, just like everybody else. And so they want to be treated with respect. They want to be, treated with respect. And it's not just about their sports career, because they are more than just athletes.
So before we get to women in sports, I want to ask you, what's it like sharing your story on our platforms like this one? And I knew you were on my our friend's Courtney show too. I think a couple months back, I think. But so what's it like just to share your story on these platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I always appreciate people inviting me to come, because I love sharing my story, not because I like to talk about myself, but because I think that you never know who hears your story that you can connect with, right? And that if you can just make a difference for one person, then it's worth sharing your story. And that's for anybody. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. Like, we all have the ability to positively impact somebody else's life. And that's why I love coming on shows, because it gives me an opportunity to try to do that.
Yeah. So I want to get to an important topic that everyone should be talking about right now, women in sports. So what's it like seeing yourself and other females getting more opportunities, not only female sports, but male sports, like Becky Hammond, Sarah Fuller, and then Sarah Thomas, the first female ref. And then,
yes.
And then also, like, what's it like just seeing them and seeing women in sports evolve now?
Yeah, I think it's amazing, first and foremost, because it's been a struggle for a long time for women to be viewed as credible individuals in the sports space. And I mean, even from my own story, when I published Move the Ball, I didn't know anybody that played professional. I didn't know anyone. And every time I had an opportunity to try to connect, I took it, and some people gave me time and other people didn't. And even when we got on the phone, you tell them what you did and they were like, okay, but they really didn't view you as credible, and so they weren't rude to you, but they just didn't believe in you. And that sucks. Rejection sucks, but you just got to keep going. You just got to focus on that next play, as, football guys say. And so eventually people took a chance. And then, as you mentioned earlier, in the sports world, it is all about who you know. And if you have someone that will vouch for you, then another door can open and another one and another one. And so it's really about the relationships that you make with people. And those relationships might not lead to something right away. But like when I connect with people, it's because I have a genuine interest in connecting, not because of what they can do for me. Right. And because of that, people have seen that. And so they're like, okay, she's not trying to use me for my network and so they see what you're doing, they want to help you. And so I'm very, very thankful for the people that have helped me to propel forward. Because I think in life, no matter whether you're in sports or not, there's people that take a chance on you to help you grow and help you get to where you want to go.
So what advice would you give young kids and young girls, and what advice would you give them for them to see this not happening? And what tips and what advice would you give them?
Yeah, so I'm going to share my 3 favorite quotes because I think that they apply here. So my first one is to always live by faith and not by sight, meaning that plan into action, and don't let the rejection or the negativity of the day-to-day deter you from pursuing that dream. And we've seen a number of women paving the way. You mentioned some earlier, Sarah Thomas, Sarah Fuller. The NFL now has a few full-time women position coaches, which is great. But it didn't start off though, and they just stuck with it. They didn't give up. Trusting the process is the second piece of that. So if you know what you have to do and the work you need to put in, and so it's just a matter of that consistency and doing it day in and day out, and the results will come. It may not happen when you want, it likely will not. But if you trust the process and keep at it, it will happen. And then the third part of that is it's a 2-parter, but it's to always write a story that you never want to stop reading, which is about your life. Like, make sure that you're living intentionally and doing the things that you want, not the things to do a paycheck. And the second part of that is don't strive to be well known, strive to be worth knowing. Because I'd rather have less people know who I am, but feel like it was worth knowing me than the world know who I was and not really care. So that would be my advice for people.
Yeah, I see you be posting quotes too on your Instagram, and that's I love when people post quotes. Yes. Because once I see that on my page, then that's when for myself I see it as a good day when I see quotes.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yes, I want to ask you. Obviously, you're from Chicago, but I want to ask you about your Bears fandom and how did you become a Bears fan?
Well, growing up in Chicago in the 80s, it was easy to be a Bears fan because they had a great team. Won the Super Bowl. So and it wasn't just about them winning the Super Bowl; it was about the characters that were on that team that really made them so great, and the personalities. But because I grew up in that era and my parents were Bears fans, that's who I became, and I'm a loyal Bears fan through and through today.
I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan here from Jersey.
Gotcha. Okay.
But obviously the Bears they're always known for their defense. So and they haven't had a great quarterback since I would say Kyle Warren. But what do you think they should? Are you kind of concerned that they haven't found their quarterback because Mitchell Trubisky didn't work out, and obviously they brought in Andy Dalton, but he's not obviously a long-term quarterback. Do you think they'll find their quarterback in this draft or next year's draft? Or?
Well, I would like to think they would. I am concerned that they don't have a quarterback because, yes, the Bears have traditionally been a defensive style team. However, that's only going to get you so far, especially when you look at the teams that we have in the league now. You've got some really strong quarterbacks and your defense can help, but you got to score points and not just defensive points. So having your quarterback is, the driver of the team, and we've struggled there for quite some time. So, will they pick? There's some talks. Are they going to try to pick somebody else up in the draft? We'll see. I don't think Ryan Pace has been very effective in his choices as over the last few years, and I don't think I'm alone in my view on that. So, I'm not too excited. I'm just like, we'll see, but I'm not overly excited about that we're going to pick up the talent that we need. But who knows? I could be surprised.
Yeah, anything can happen, right? So
yes.
So last couple of things here before I let you go. Would you like to promote your podcast on here? Let people know what you guys have coming up next, and what other guests is coming up before the draft begins?
Yeah, so the podcast called Move the Ball. It's on any of the major platforms if you just search by Move the Ball. Also, I have a website, movetheballpodcast.com. So we're in this Path to the Draft series that you mentioned earlier. So I have I have two Naval Academy football guys that are coming on, and so they do really great jobs. Have a guy, Adrian Hardy. His dad played in the league, and so he's Adrian Hardy Jr. Tavante Beckett played at Marshall. Oscar Bradburn is a punter from Virginia Tech, and I never had a punter on before, so it was really interesting hearing his perspective, especially because he is from Australia. Oh, wow. Too. So he came over to play football specifically. So he shares some really great insights as well. So those are some of the guys coming up on the show. And then what I'm going to do to end the series on the back end. So before I did the series, I had a young man by the name of Isaiah Wright. He was signed as a free agent last year. And then he had his rookie season. I had him come talking about his last year. The last episode of the series, I have another guy who was a rookie for Tampa Bay. So he comes on and talks about his journey as a rookie, and then also obviously winning a Super Bowl and playing with Tom Brady and that kind of thing. So that's a really great episode too. He did a really nice job.
So the last three things here, our team, we partnered with two companies. The first one is called Eplan X Cosmetics. If you're interested in that, I'll send you the link. The promo code is NR20. You can mention to your friends too. And also the other company we partnered up is called Buck and Beers for males hairstyle products. Same promo code NR20. If your friends are interested, I'm going to send you that link too. We're just trying to help them promote their companies so we can get more traffic for the show. So the last few things here, also we're partnered up with the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's a former NFL coach trying to get back into coaching. We're ambassadors for their foundations, trying to help them prevent human trafficking, making sure these kids stay safe and the community stays safe. And we're really grateful to be part of that. That foundation is really inspiring. And I just want to bring that up. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Absolutely, yes. I would say thank you for all the hard work that you do, the risks that you put out there to keep us all safe. As a military service member myself, I know what it was like to be gone last year with COVID and deployed and trying to navigate through all the craziness. And so I don't take that lightly, the sacrifices that all of our frontline workers are doing to really try to make an impact. So I say thank you to all of you.
Oh, thank you for your service too.
Thank you.
So there it is. That wraps up episode 747 with the inspiring, hardworking podcaster, Jennifer A. Garrett. Go check out her show, Move the Ball. Like I said, she works hard. She's really amazing, and keep up the great work. And we would like to have you back as a returning guest so you can meet the full team. But we're going to be still connected. I'm going to be following your career, and you and your family stay safe.
Thank you so much for having me on today.
Anytime. All right.